My mother didn't sign away her home. My brother did it for her. And by the time I found out, the house was already gone. Full script. Every 4 years. For the last 4 years of my mother's life, I was the one who slept on a cot in her hospital room, so she wouldn't wake up alone in the dark. I was the one who learned to read her oxygen monitor, who figured out which nurse to call at 2 a.m. when her breathing changed, who held her hand during every needle stick, and apologized to her because I couldn't make it stop hurting. My brother, Dennis, sent flowers on her birthday. Tulips. Every year. Same florist. Probably the same online order. He'd call from wherever he was, Phoenix, I think, or maybe Sacramento by then, and tell her she sounded wonderful. She never sounded wonderful, but she always smiled when he called. My mother's name was Lorraine. She was 79 years old, and she had congestive heart failure, early-stage dementia, and the stubbornest streak of grace I have ever seen in a human being. She didn't complain, not once. She grew up in rural Kentucky, moved to Ohio when she married my father, and she raised 3 kids in a house she and my dad paid off 22 years ago. That house was everything to her. It was where she planted her roses, where she made Thanksgiving for 40 years, where she kept my dad's cardigan folded on the back of his chair, even after he was gone. The caregiving started small, a few extra trips to the doctor, staying over on weekends. Then it became everything. I was a dental hygienist. I cut my hours to part-time so I could take her to our cardiology appointments on Thursdays. I organized her 12 medications into a weekly pill sorter every Sunday night. Blue bins for morning, white bins for evening. I cooked soft foods because her swallowing had gotten difficult. Scrambled eggs, oatmeal with cinnamon, mashed sweet potato the way she liked it, with just a little brown sugar. I did her laundry. I changed her sheets twice a week. I helped her bathe. I sat with her through the confusion, the nights she forgot my name, the mornings she thought my father was still alive and got up to make him coffee. I never told her that broke my heart. I just gently reminded her and held her through the grief like it was new, because for her it was. I spent over $41,000 of my own savings over those 4 years on medical equipment, on prescription copays insurance wouldn't cover, on a ramp for her back door, on a part-time aide 3 mornings a week so I could go to work. I didn't document any of it. I didn't think I needed to. She was my mother. But what I didn't know then, what I never suspected, was that Dennis had been paying attention to the house. He started visiting more in the last 18 months, every 6 weeks or so. That was unusual for him, but I told myself people change. Maybe he finally felt guilty. Maybe he wanted to be closer to her while he still had time. He was charming when he visited. He'd bring her pastries from a bakery, help her with the crossword, sit with her on the porch and talk about old times. My mother loved it. She'd light up for days after he left. I told myself I was being petty for noticing how he never offered to stay. How the visits were always timed. 3 days, 4 at most. How he'd sometimes close her bedroom door and talk to her for a long time, and she'd seem confused or tired afterward but never say about what. I told myself I was jealous. I was wrong. I was seeing something real. One afternoon in March, I came over to find a business card on the kitchen counter. A man named Gerald P. Fitch, attorney at law, Harmon, Ohio. I didn't recognize the name. Mom's regular attorney was a woman named Sandra Kreis, who'd handled her affairs for 15 years. I asked my mother who Gerald Fitch was. She looked at the card for a long moment and said she didn't remember. I almost called the number that night. I didn't. A week later, I noticed her mail had been redirected, specifically the mail from First Consolidated Savings, the bank where she kept the account my father had opened in 1978. When I called to ask about it, they said they couldn't discuss the account with me because I wasn't on it. I had been on that account for 7 years. I called Dennis. He said it was a bank error. He'd look into it. He sounded calm and slightly annoyed, the way he always did when he wanted me to feel like I was overreacting. I almost believed him. My mother had a bad episode in mid-April. Her breathing worsened, and she was admitted to Cedar Valley Memorial. Not a real hospital, I should say, just what I'm calling it, for 5 days. During that time, Dennis came to town. He stayed at a hotel. He visited her each day for about an hour, and he was kind and attentive, and she seemed happy to see him. He did not ask me if I needed anything. He did not offer to sit with her overnight. He left on the 4th day. She was discharged on the 5th. It wasn't until 6 weeks later that I found out what he had done during those hospital visits. On a Tuesday morning in June, I received a certified letter. It was from an office called the Harmon County Recorder. It informed me that the property at 412 South Ecamoor Ridge Road, my mother's house, the house she'd lived in for 41 years, had been transferred to a limited liability company called DKW Property Holdings. I didn't know what DKW stood for at first. Dennis Kenneth Whitmore. My brother's initials. The transfer had been executed using a power of attorney document dated 3 weeks prior. Signed, according to the paperwork, by Lorraine Whitmore. Notarized by a notary whose name I did not recognize. Prepared by Gerald P. Fitch, attorney at law. My mother was in the hospital on the date that document was signed. I had her discharge papers at home. I had the nursing notes. I had the visitor log. And I had something else. Something that Dennis did not know about. I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time after that letter arrived. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there with the paper in my lap and looked at the front of the house. The rose bushes my mother had planted in 1989. The wind chimes on the porch she bought at a craft fair in 2003. The little ceramic cardinal on the window ledge that my father had given her the Christmas before he died. I thought about every morning I had spent in that house making her breakfast. Every night I had stayed because she was scared. Every time I had smiled through exhaustion and told her everything was going to be okay. And then I thought about Dennis and his tulips and his 3 date visits and his business card on the kitchen counter. I went inside and I called an elder law attorney. Her name was Patricia Aldridge, and her office was 40 minutes away. She took my call that same afternoon. Patricia was careful and methodical. She did not promise me anything, but she listened to everything. The business card, the bank account, the redirected mail, the certified letter, the hospital dates. She asked me one question at the end. Did your mother ever agree to give him that property? I told her I didn't believe so. And then I told her what I had. 18 months earlier, because my mother kept forgetting our conversations, I had started recording our Sunday calls on my phone, just so I could play things back to her if she got confused. I had over 60 recordings. In those recordings, my mother talked about her house constantly. She talked about leaving it to both of her children equally. She talked about how she'd told Dennis it wasn't for sale. She talked about a conversation she'd had with him where he'd asked her to sign something, and she'd said she wanted to wait and talk to Sandra first. Sandra Kreis, her real attorney. She never got to talk to Sandra, and she never knowingly signed that POA. The question was, could we prove it? Patricia subpoenaed the notary records and the power of attorney document through the Elder Financial Exploitation Unit at the county's Adult Protective Services office. She'd also requested my mother's medical records from Cedar Valley Memorial for the dates surrounding the alleged signing. What came back was damning. The medical records showed that on the date the power of attorney was notarized, my mother had been administered a sedative for an anxiety episode at 10:45 a.m. The document's notary timestamp read 11:20 a.m., 35 minutes later. My mother would not have been coherent. A neurologist Patricia consulted stated in a written opinion that a patient in her cognitive state, under that medication, would have lacked legal capacity to execute a binding document. Furthermore, the notary whose name appeared on the document, she had retired from practice 14 months earlier. Her notary commission had lapsed. The seal used on the document was invalid. No one in that room at the county recorder's office was ready for what happened next. The transfer was challenged in probate court. The judge issued a temporary injunction freezing the property transfer within 6 weeks of the filing. Dennis hired an attorney, a smooth-talking man from Columbus who kept using the phrase estate planning decision as if that made any of it ordinary. I gave my testimony calmly. I brought my recordings. I brought my caregiving receipts. I brought the hospital discharge papers and the visitor logs and the statement from my mother's aide, a woman named Carla, who had been present the morning Dennis first asked my mother about the property. Carla remembered it clearly. She said Lorraine had seemed uncomfortable and had changed the subject. My mother passed away in September, before the case was resolved. I sat with her at the end. Dennis did not make it in time. She knew I was there. She squeezed my hand. That was enough. In February, the court ruled in my favor. The power of attorney was declared invalid due to the lapse notary commission, the incapacity evidence, and the fraudulent timeline. The property transfer to DKW Property Holdings was reversed. The house was restored to my mother's estate, to be distributed according to her original will, which Sandra Kreis had on file, untouched, naming both of her children as equal heirs. Dennis was ordered to pay back $6,200 in rental income he had collected from a tenant he had placed in the property during the dispute. The state bar was notified about Gerald P. Fitch's role in preparing a document using an invalid notary seal. My brother did not speak to me at the estate settlement. He took his half and left. I don't expect to hear from him. I still have the house. I haven't decided what to do with it yet. Sometimes I go there and sit on the porch where my mother used to sit. The rose bushes need some work. The ceramic cardinal is still on the window ledge. Some mornings I make her oatmeal with cinnamon and a little brown sugar, and I eat it there in her kitchen, in her chair, and I let myself remember her the right way. Not the fear, not the certified letter, not the courtroom, just her, her hands, her voice, her grace. Betrayal doesn't get the last word. It only feels that way, in the dark, in the car, in the quiet after you open a letter. But the truth has a way of outlasting the lie, if you're willing to stay in the fight long enough to let it breathe. I was tired, I was broke, I was grieving, and I was still standing. That's the part Dennis never counted on. Caregiving is invisible work. The world doesn't watch it. The courts don't see it. Not until you make them. Document everything. Save the records. Keep the receipts. Not because you're preparing for a fight, but because the people who love you quietly deserve to have the truth on their side when the people who love money come looking. Betrayal can steal your time, your savings, and your sleep. It cannot take what you actually gave. That lives in the people who received it, and it outlasts every forged signature in the world.